What are the success rates? You have 50-year-old women having babies. Sometimes that gives a false sense of security to some women.
A young, healthy couple where the sperm is normal, where they're ovulating every month, the tubes are open, there's no other issues. Their chance of getting pregnant, not a baby, is about 17%. The single biggest key determinant of success and failure in IVF is
John, what a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
To have you here. So, IVF is a big topic.
Yeah.
It really is. And,
Yeah.
Even just the amount of questions that I get in on a regular basis about it.
Yeah, more so now, I think, than any other time, especially in Irish history. Like, I've been doing this gig for, about 10, 11 years now, exclusively in IVF. And the conversations that are happening now compared to what were happening in 2012, it's night and day in the difference. People are talking about it. People are sharing their stories. People who get success with IVF are really open about it generally, and will talk to other women and other couples, which is incredibly powerful. You cannot overstate the value of being willing to share your fertility journey with somebody else, because up until that point, and even still to an extent, it's so isolating. It's so lonely. It's so insular, and you feel like you're the only person in the world. So when these topics do come out and when you get this opportunity to share, it's really valuable.
It is. And like what you said, they can be so quiet about it and ashamed of themselves going through it. They feel they've failed in some way as a woman or a man, not being able to have babies. And we are stripping away. But you did say that it's when they're successful, they tend to share. A lot of people that aren't successful, they're suffering in silence, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I think that what you said there, that guilt and shame, I think negative cycles of fertility treatment are associated with the worst elements of ourselves. Of course, there's sadness. Everybody expects there to be sadness, and people are sympathetic about the sadness. What they are less sympathetic or aware of is the anger, the guilt, and the shame, which is far more overwhelming than the sadness. The feeling of personal bitter failure and disappointment, especially in respect for many people with their partner.
Yeah.
You see it with guys who really don't talk about it, and you see it with women who are reluctant to articulate it. And it creates a really powerful and terrible dynamic in the relationship, where you're left with a guy who desperately wants to support, or even a woman who desperately wants to support his or her partner as they're going through something where there's no words, there's nothing you can do to help, And meanwhile, you've got this woman who is ashamed. It's a terrible feeling. Who is ashamed that they have failed in this regard to provide a family for their partner, for their husband, for their wife, for their partner. It's awful, and it does resolve with time. And really, I don't know how to deal with these things exactly, but certainly talking about them, dragging them out into the light, and casting a bit of a light on them is important and needs to be done. And when you articulate that, immediately, oftentimes in a consultation, the partner will turn to the person who's had the loss of the miscarriage. No, I don't feel that way. So, I know you don't feel that way. Everybody acknowledges that, but it's how we all feel. And when we don't share and we don't articulate these feelings, it can get worse and it can fester.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you walk me through, what happens in an IVF cycle in general?
Yeah, super. So, what is IVF?
Yeah.
IVF is in vitro fertilization. In vitro from the Latin in glass, meaning outside the body. So what you're essentially doing with IVF is you're taking sperm and you're taking eggs and you're bringing them together in the laboratory environment to turn into embryos, and then you're putting those embryos back in a person. All right, that's at its core, it's simplest. When we stimulate the ovaries, though, we can get certain advantages. So every month, on a standard month, a woman will ovulate and release one egg, but she's going to throw away thousands of eggs that month. That's the normal physiological mechanism. With IVF, with stimulation medications, we're trying to capture as many of those eggs as we can. Eggs that were going to be lost that month anyway. We're not stealing from the future. So you stimulate the ovaries to supraphysiological levels, to much higher than they're normal, and then you collect all the eggs. Then you try to create as many embryos as you can. And with newer techniques, you can then freeze those embryos and give people multiple bites at a successful outcome.
Okay.
So an IVF cycle will generally involve a course of medications, tablets followed by injections, little diabetic needle, subcutaneous injections. The injections will go on for about 12 or 13 days or so. then an egg retrieval, a small transvaginal procedure that's done usually under conscious sedation, takes about 10, 15 minutes. We're going to do 12 of them tomorrow.
Okay.
You know? So like we, you know,
Yeah.
it's not a small deal, but it's not the biggest deal in the world.
Okay.
And then generally speaking, a few days later, an embryo transfer.
And when you say transvaginal, you mean you go up into the vagina and you pull the eggs out that way?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You pass a very small, narrow needle through the top of the vagina into the ovary, and you suck the fluid out from the ovary. And then you take that fluid and you give it to the lab, the embryologists, the scientists in the lab, who will sift through the fluid looking for eggs.
Okay.
It's fascinating.
It really is, isn't it?
Oh yeah, no, it's functionally magic. Like what happens in the lab, it really is. It's absolutely crazy.
Okay. And then what are the success rates? Because we're hearing all the time of these, you know, you have 48-year-old, 50-year-old women having babies. And then I think that sometimes that gives a false sense of security to some women.
You're really onto something there. So success rates in fertility in general are very variable. Success rates in IVF, even more so. So if you just take natural background fertility, what is a couple's chance of getting pregnant themselves? A young, healthy couple where the sperm is normal, where they're ovulating every month, the tubes are open, no other issues, all right? Their chance of getting pregnant, not a baby, getting pregnant is about 17%, 1-7.
Okay.
It's bananas low. I mean, we're taught that she'll get pregnant if he hangs his trousers on the end of the bed. How we're educated on this is so remiss. Your chance of getting pregnant is not high. We are not fertile creatures. We're not rabbits. We're not mice. We don't have litters of kids every 6 or 7 weeks. We have very limited reproductive potential. And you see that reflected in the quality and quantity of sperm, and you see it reflected in the quality and quantity of eggs as well. So that's your baseline, 17%.
And is that across all age groups then?
It drops a little bit as you get older. It's a really good question. It does drop a little bit. And the longer you try without getting success, then it really starts to drop. Where you see, but that's only a pregnancy rate, where you see your chances of success really dip as you get older isn't in terms of necessarily getting pregnant, it's in terms of staying pregnant. So when you are young, your risk of miscarriage is maybe 20 to 25%, 1 in 4, 1 in 5 pregnancies. As you get older, that number starts to climb. When you are 40 years old, your risk of miscarriage is 50%.
Goodness me.
When you are 44 years old, your risk of miscarriage is probably about 90, 95%.
Okay.
So you can see how quickly that just ramps up enormously. And that's where age plays such a critical role in not just becoming pregnant, but maintaining that pregnancy.
And is the maintenance of that pregnancy is to do with age? Is that to do with the quality of the eggs? Or
Absolutely, yeah. Okay. Also the quality of the sperm.
Yeah.
Let's not understate that. But we're talking about the quality of the eggs here. The eggs and the embryos at that age from that person are more likely to have chromosomal abnormalities in them, and which will result in miscarriage or failure.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why, I mean, the single biggest key determinant of success in failure in IVF is the age of the person, the woman who is providing the eggs. That's everything else is secondary. Like the number of eggs is obviously an important factor. Other factors like BMI and health and diet and endometriosis, these play a huge role as well. But age is absolutely critical. And it's terrible to harp on about it because there's not much you can do about it. You know, you can't get any younger, but it really is. And that's why we have these conversations. It's about awareness. It's about ownership. It's about agency. You tend to hold the quality of your eggs up until the age of about 34. 34 to 40 is when it drops. 40 onwards is when it drops more sharply.
Okay. Because, you know, we like, I mean, I'm 44, right? And I look so much younger and better than my granny did at 44.
Absolutely.
I absolutely know that because we have all these things that can help us these days, okay?
Yeah.
And also we know how to live our lives better. We have less children, therefore we're less wrecked. But regardless, so you have women that are in their late 30s, early 40s that look and feel amazing because they're running triathlons, they're doing all kinds of things. And then it's a shock to them when they come in and they find that their fertility is
I think it can be an enormous shock. There's a story I tell, and this happened a number of years back. I was doing a consultation, and the woman in question was well into her 40s, and they'd been trying for a while. As I was talking, I was getting a sense from her that she really didn't have an awareness of the success rates, you know, so I was trying to be really soft and really gentle about building up to this, you know, not so great news that I was going to have to give her. And I said, well, look, you know, this is the number of eggs that we might get. We might get like 7 eggs from you, and maybe some of them will fertilize, and maybe if we're lucky, we'll make an embryo, and then we'll transfer that embryo, but that's another hill to climb. And will you get pregnant? And then, of course, there's a risk of miscarriage. So between all of these, knocking these numbers down, I said, your chance of having a baby is 4 to 5%. And she went white. She was absolutely devastated. Took a minute. We actually hit pause on the consult for a few minutes, went outside, both her and the husband, composed themselves, came back, and we started back up again, started having a conversation about what to do, how to go. So she's asked me about the process. I go through the process. She just cuts across me at some point and goes, she said, I think I'm going to go ahead with this, but still, she said, 45%, that's so low.
Okay.
Oh my God. And it was only that her husband turned to her and said, no, not 45, 4 to 5%.
Okay.
And obviously then that was sparked another, and that was another kick in the teeth for her. But what that illustrated for me more than anything else was the absolute disconnect this educated woman had about her fertility potential, that she was devastated to hear a number that I would think is extremely high. As I said, well educated, well read, well literate, but still very uninformed about this very specific area that's so important to her. And that's incredible to me. That's bananas to me that we've got better, because this is going back a few years, but we're still not good. There's a lack of appreciation, and all the education seems to drive in the other direction, that you'll be fine, give it time and all the rest. And look, you might be fine. And I'm certainly not advocating for starting families earlier, because I don't think that's a reasonable premise. But you have to acknowledge that physiologically speaking, biologically speaking, we're designed to have our children in our late teens and early 20s. You know?
Yeah, we're just not mature enough for it.
Talk to somebody who's worked on labour ward for years, and she will tell you, teenagers fire babies out like it's nothing.
My mum was a midwife. She always said that. There's the 19-year-olds that come in and just push them out.
Nothing, because that's what we're designed to do. As we get older, it's a tougher ask. Now, of course, people shouldn't be starting to think about their families when they're 18 or 19. That's ridiculous. They should be focused on their career, on their education, on finding stable relationships and things like that. But unfortunately, there's a price to be paid on that.
Yeah.
And that price is fertility awareness. That price is understanding that you are statistically more likely to run into problems as you get older.
Yeah, okay. And then what about the sperm? Because we're talking a lot about women.
Yeah, same deal. As you get older, sperm declines, and we're learning more and more all the time about how much it declines and how that can have an impact on miscarriage rates and on... Now, it's a man's world. It's a dirty little secret that we are better at dealing with male factor subfertility than female factor subfertility.
How so?
The technology. Yeah, I know. It's not fair. IVF is leaving the eggs and sperm in a dish to fertilize, right?
Right.
About 30 years ago, we came up with ICSI, intracytoplasmic sperm injection. This is where instead of leaving the eggs and sperm in a dish together, you select out a good sperm and you inject it directly into the egg. So that means you can do an awful lot more with an awful lot less. So if you have somebody with a critically low sperm sample, and maybe there's only 20 sperm in the whole sample,
or they're swimming backwards.
Yeah, they just don't look right. You still only need, if you've got 10 eggs, which is a decent number of eggs, you only need 10 sperm. You don't need, in a normal sperm sample, there'd be 80 or 100 million sperm. So you can do, while a couple where he's got very low sperm count, they're extremely unlikely to conceive spontaneously, they'll do very well with ICSI.
Okay.
Because even if your sperm count is really, 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 really low, there's probably still thousands in there.
Okay.
Whereas with eggs, if your egg count is really, 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 really low, you mightn't get any or one.
Okay.
So we're better. And as a result of that, paradoxically, because ICSI has been such a game changer in terms of managing male fertility, it's made us really lazy and careless about male fertility because we have a fix. Just do that. Okay. So we haven't looked at that as much. And I think that's starting to change now. And sperm health as a function of general health is starting to be looked at more. And in fact, if you look at supplements, and it's a controversial area, but where you actually have some evidence is in sperm health. Some people's sperm just really need some antioxidant therapy. Some people just need high dose vitamin D, some selenium, vitamin C, all this stuff that you know. And CoQ10 and the like, and that can really help some people with sperm. And equally, some people have sperm that's just so sensitive to environmental changes, and that's diet, lifestyle, smoking, alcohol, weight, exercise, phone in your pocket, laptop on your lap, saunas, baths, jacuzzis.
Heated car seats.
Exactly. Like crazy stuff. And some people have sperm that is just bulletproof, and they can do whatever the hell they want, and their sperm is going to behave exactly as it's going to behave. Be that good or bad, some people can't. And then we're learning more about secondary tests on sperm, things like DNA fragmentation, how this is fascinating.
Yeah,
got a minute on this?
I want to go down this route.
So DNA fragmentation it's a really, really interesting area. So all cells in your body have DNA in them, right? And that DNA gets subject to damage every day. Anything that stresses a cell tends to damage its DNA. Cells have the ability to repair their own DNA. And when a cell loses the ability to repair its own DNA, it triggers its own cell death about 4 days later. It's called apoptosis, and it's a normal part of cells. It's why we regenerate, why we slough off skin, all the rest of it. Sperm are different. Sperm cannot recognize when their DNA is damaged, and they do not have the ability to repair their own DNA. As a result, as a compensatory mechanism, the DNA in sperm is wound and packed more tightly than it is in other cells, making it resistant to damage from oxidative stress. So these tests, DNA fragmentation testing, doesn't really look to see how damaged the sperm is, but rather how damageable the sperm is, how unwound it is, how friable it is. Because we think that anything that stresses the cell can then damage the DNA. You've now got a defective blueprint. The sperm's not going to recognize that. That defective blueprint gets delivered to an egg to give a defective blueprint for the embryo, which is going to result in failure or miscarriage. Okay. That's the logic. And then there are various strategies that can be used to try to improve the integrity of the DNA within the sperm. And then if that's not working, you can reduce the effort the sperm has to make to get into the egg by doing something like ICSI, by injecting the sperm into the egg itself, or indeed in some cases, thankfully rarely, you can do a small surgical procedure and take the sperm directly from the testes. So you don't even have the stress of ejaculation.
Okay.
Fascinating.
That is. Yeah. Now, I want to talk about, because you said that we can improve sperm health for some men.
Yes.
And obviously, sperm is produced, every 3 months? And
72 days, yeah.
But women are born with their eggs.
Exactly. Now, it's a slightly devious way of saying it, because the mechanisms aren't so wildly different. But certainly, and nobody wants to hear this. Nobody wants to hear this, but it's unfortunately true. Improving egg quality is the holy grail of all fertility. Okay? All fertility. It's how do I improve my egg quality? And when you look at the data, what can be used, and there have been reams of books and treatises and all the rest written on this. There is very, very, very little out there that has been shown to actually improve egg quality.
Okay.
It's tough. Egg quality gets worse as you get older. It tends not to get better. And it can be very variable. Just because you've looked at 20 eggs from somebody and they're all terrible doesn't mean that all that person's eggs are terrible. Not by any measure means. And what people don't really get is that do you have an egg quality issue? Of course you have an egg quality issue. You're a human being. All human beings have an egg quality issue. Most eggs are crap. Like if I'm doing egg freezing on somebody, social egg freezing, I'm taking eggs from an optimized, young, healthy woman. This woman has the best eggs that you can have, Even still, what I will say to her, and I'm being a little bit mean with this number, but I like being mean about it. I will say to her, any one egg has a 3.5% chance of turning into a person.
Okay.
3.5. Why is that? Is there anything wrong with her? No, it's just most eggs aren't good eggs.
Okay.
Most eggs won't give babies. So, like I say, it keeps coming back to that same thing. We don't have litters. We're not designed that way. We're designed to have only a few offspring.
Yeah.
So, people don't get that if you get 10 eggs from an IVF cycle and you don't have a baby from that, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. Doesn't even mean statistically there's anything wrong with your eggs. Maybe you were just a bit unlucky.
Yeah.
So
a lot of it is to do with luck as well, is it, John?
Everything. I wish it wasn't. I wish it wasn't. All you're trying to do with IVF or with ICSI is you're trying to load the dice in your favor. Just before I came out here today. I was very fortunate, very privileged. 2 women came back into the clinic with their babies.
Oh.
And I didn't
Do you
know.
love babies?
I mean, oh yeah, I like
I asked this to a man who came in with showing a picture of his little baby 10 years ago.
the little ones and the smell. I do. And there's no photos of me out there kind of kissing babies. That I do. Like give them a back. They you know they make noise. They're selfish. But I do. But it was fascinating. Because I didn't know it at the time, because one of the patients came in under my care, one of them was under the care of Dr. Magada, or other doctor in the clinic. They were sisters. They didn't tell us.
Okay.
And their stories couldn't be more different. They were similar in age. One of them came in, did a cycle, produced buckets of eggs, produced 14 embryos, which is an outrageously high number of embryos. Generally, you're happy with 2 or 3. And got pregnant and had her baby on the first transfer. Gold, knocked it out of the park. Second lady, her sister, similar age, first cycle, negative. 2 embryos, both transferred, neither worked. Did a second cycle, produced 5 embryos, put 4 of them back in, nothing happened. Put the last one in, where nobody's really feeling it, baby. So they both got babies.
Thank God.
Thank God. But their stories, this is sisters, could not be more different.
Yeah.
One was lucky. The other one wasn't. Now, you can look at those stories, go, oh, that one has much better egg quality. That might be true. Maybe. I'm not saying it's not. I'm saying you don't have enough evidence to say that. All you have is one cycle to go on. You know?
Yeah.
Maybe she was just really lucky to produce that many embryos. Maybe she was really unlucky to only produce fewer. They were both fortunate enough to get babies at the end, but one had a much tougher road, obviously, to get there. Of course. You know? And it really does illustrate how much we don't know about all of this stuff. Yeah. You know? That what we're trying to do with an IVF cycle is try to condense and compress fertility into a shorter period of time, trying to take what was going to be lost and get value for it. And you can't, like, every single patient I see that I do a consult on, you asked at the start about success rates, which is a completely reasonable thing to ask about. And every single person, you get their data, you get their results, you look at their history, you look at where they've been, and then what you try to do as accurate as you can, you write this down, you give them what I think your percentage chance of having a baby from a complete round of IVF is. And it really very, very rarely goes above 60%.
Okay.
That would be exceptional. That I would give a number above 60%. It might be, if somebody's young, tubal problems, things like that, you could go to 70%, but even then, that's probably as high as you'd ever go. And some people would bite your arm off for any double-digit number because they're working off low singles, you know? And that's, I think, really critical to how we comport ourselves, how we do business, how we interact with patients, is that they have an understanding of what that number is, what that means as they're progressing through it. Because for some people, 40% is horrifically low. For some people, 10% is brilliant. Yeah. You know, and it depends where you've come from, what your story is.
And just getting back in the egg quality there, because I think like it's important, because I've seen women think that they can take any amount of supplements or any amount of herbs or do any amount of acupuncture and everything. But the reality really is, and it's a sad reality, you're born with the eggs, and the older that you get, the egg quality diminishes. And that's...
And some people will run out of eggs when they're 16 years old.
God.
Which is premature ovarian failure or fragile X syndrome. There's lots
that's rare though, isn't it?
Oh, it's vanishingly rare. But I'm just saying, you know, there's no ground floor on this. So you are. And like, it's terrible. It's awful when you've got somebody in front of you who's struggling, who's been through cycles, who's doing something. It's a hell of a lot easier to tell people, take this supplement, do this thing. And what tends to get said, the language that gets used an awful lot in this space is, sure, it won't do any harm and it might do some good. And don't you want to look back and say you did everything you could? Yeah. Now, you have to be some kind of monster to make an argument against that line. Yes. And here I am doing exactly that. I think it's just the problem is we have historically been very, very, very careless of the actual costs of that position. And I think if you talk to women who've gone through fertility treatment, and I do this every week, and if you're honest with them and they've been doing it for a while, you can ask them, tell me about the press in your kitchen. And they'll know straight away what you're talking about. That press in the kitchen that is filled all the way to the back, sometimes stacked too deep, with stuff that they have been told by a friend, by a colleague, by a relative, by somebody else.
It worked for me. It
online.
Worked for her. Yeah.
I did 3 cycles. It didn't work. Then I took X, and X could be anything.
Yeah.
And then I had a baby. Good luck to you being brave enough not to put X into your lockbox. Yeah. Good luck. I mean, because it's really difficult not to. What, you don't want success? X worked. What the hell's wrong with you? Why wouldn't you use X? The problem is you add. You never subtract. You only ever add. Now you're taking a pile of supplements. You're living on a knife edge in terms of diet and lifestyle. Everything good in your life is withering on the vine. Your professional career, your personal relationships, everything's taking a backseat to this singular focused journey.
Even your relationship, which is so stressful.
Desperately so. And you're doing all of this. All you're really doing after a while is feeling guilty because you can't maintain that high frequency. So now you've bought the supplements and you're not even taking the damn things. Not as much as you should. Not like, because you're taking that one and that one and that one and that one, and it's too hard to stay on top of. I will happily make somebody jump through hoops of fire. I've no problem with that. Nothing worthwhile is easy, and God knows this stuff is very hard. But it has to be in service to a tangible, evidence-based goal. And if something is not going to be of value to you, and value to you in this case is one thing and one thing only, a happy, healthy baby, then you need to be very cautious about disappearing down that rabbit hole in the first place. I think something you mentioned, word acupuncture. I'm a big fan of acupuncture. I think for people who engage positively with acupuncture, it is fantastic. And the value of it has been very well demonstrated and very well proven. It reduces anxiety, it reduces stress, it reduces depression, it speeds up interval between cycles, it speeds up getting back into treatment if it hasn't worked. Everything is better if you do it and you engage with it positively. Do you know why? Because it's a wonderful thing to do. For people who enjoy it, it's a forced time away from the rest of their life.
Yeah.
We're all full of good intentions about how we're going to manage self-care, right? We're all going to do this, that, and the other. And then you come home and it's, oh God, it's 6 o'clock. I haven't made it. There's laundry to be done. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm not going to do any of that stuff that kicks up endorphins. I'm not going to get excited. I'm not going to mind myself. I'm going to eat some bad food and I'm going to watch some even worse TV, right? Yeah. We all do this. We all do this about our lives doing this. If you do something like acupuncture or reflexology, that's a booked session. You got to go for that. You've already paid for it and you are saved from yourself. And it's people who speak positively about it, I think they really do love it and it's incredibly valuable. Does it kick up your chance of having a baby? I know there's people who'll disagree with me, but it's very controversial to say so. I don't think you have any strong evidence that says it increases live birth rates. Now, maybe it does by getting you into cycle faster. You with me?
Or even just the whole, if it relaxes you and takes your mind off things.
Absolutely. Look, it's tough. And again, it's very tough for me to say that that's going to make you more pregnant because I don't think the data supports that. But it's definitely incredibly valuable to have that in your arsenal while you're going through something as horrifically stressful as fertility treatment.
Yeah.
So of course you should engage positively with these things. Of course these things are a really, really, really good idea. Sometimes they tend to overstate and they go, oh, listen, you need to do this. And this is the difference between success and failure. There's something like stress. That's a question you get asked all the time. Is stress going to impact my egg quality? Is stress going to impact my chances of success? And look, it's really hard for me to give a precise answer to that. The evidence would suggest that stress does not play a significant role in fertility, miscarriage, or live birth rates, either inside or outside of IVF. That's good news, not bad news. Of course, you should look at things to try to reduce stress. And of course, we understand a theoretical, strong framework for how stress would negatively impact on these things. But I think you need to be cautious as well, because it becomes a vicious cycle. You need to be really careful how you talk to people. I don't think a positive mental attitude is going to make IVF more successful than a negative mental attitude. You can't think yourself out of a miscarriage. You can't. So, and I think that there's a pile of, again, that comes back to that guilt and anger and shame that comes with it. I wasn't feeling cheery enough about IVF. How the hell can you feel cheery about IVF? You've been through it. Maybe you've had a negative transfer. It's an incredibly tough road to go down. I'm not expecting you to be cheery about it. And that's okay. It's okay for you to feel bad. It's okay for you to have bad days and good days. Give yourself a break. How you feel about the process is not going to influence the outcome of the process. You'll get success by engaging, by being proactive, by being sensible, by being minding yourself, engaging in activities that try to drag you a little bit out of the difficulties of it, and doing cycles, getting eggs, getting embryos, doing transfers.
Okay, so when people, because I know that people that are going through it or they're struggling with their fertility and they're told, oh, if you just relax now, you'll get pregnant.
It's a red rag to a bull. It really is. And if people aren't being malicious, but the world's divided into 3 cohorts. People who have children, people who don't have children but don't want them, and the others, And the first 2 groups don't have a nod about the third group, and they tend to speak in platitudes. They tend to speak in terms of just relax, it'll happen, don't worry about it. Aren't you lucky that you don't have any kids? They're an awful pain in the ass, all the rest. It is enraging to the subfertile or struggling population. It is a red rag to a bull, and they tend to learn various coping mechanisms for just biting down at Christmas dinner, and not, and eventually they pop. Eventually somebody says something and they get like 6 months of compressed
vitriol.
Vitriol right back in their face. And that hits the reset button, and then we can go back to baseline. And again, people aren't being malicious. They aren't. They just lack empathy. And empathy, like sympathy is all well and good, but it doesn't get you much. Empathy is incredibly powerful. So finding somebody you trust, you can talk to, who will share, who has some notion of the experience that you've been through, incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. It was funny. I was at a talk there a couple of months back. I think it was IBEC or something like that. And we were talking, it wasn't about like the tech industry. Your Facebooks and your Apples and your Googles are very good at, they've got various different systems in place to support women going through pregnancy loss or having families or going through fertility treatment. Some of the other business, the banking sector and stuff, they're a bit slow to catch up, but they're trying. They're making some steps. They're slow, but they're trying. And we were kind of going around talking about the various supports that were in place that an organization would have if you were struggling with fertility treatment, if you were struggling with cancer. The single biggest metric of whether or not a woman or a man felt supported in the workplace while going through fertility treatment, the only thing that made an absolute tangible difference was not the program, was not the employee assistance thing, was whether or not their line manager had gone through IVF.
Oh my goodness.
If your line manager has gone through IVF, you're golden. And if your line manager hasn't gone through IVF, then it's going to be a bit of a struggle.
Makes total sense, doesn't it?
I mean, that again, not rocket science, but really, really illustrative. And again, I don't think the line managers who haven't gone through this are being malicious. I don't. I just think they don't know. They can't know. Until you've gone through it, you don't know. And you tell people before a cycle, look, the hard part of a cycle isn't the injections, it isn't the egg collection, it isn't the embryo transfer. There's challenges to all of that, but you'll get through it. The hard part is everything afterwards. The hard part is waiting to see if you've made an embryo. The hard part is waiting the over-analysis after an embryo transfer, that 12 days after you get a positive pregnancy test, the fear, will it last? Will it stick? If you've had a pregnancy loss before, any woman who's had a miscarriage before knows the feeling. Pregnancy used to be a joyous time. Now it's scary.
Yeah.
Until you get beyond that point where the miscarriage happened. That's how it works, So people who've had pregnancy loss before can empathize with people who are going through it. People who haven't, they can be sympathetic, but they can't empathize in the same way. That's tough, and it makes it very lonely.
Yeah, no, it really does. So, John, how did you get into all this?
I kind of fell into it a little bit. I did medicine. Qualified.
Did you? I'd really well hope so. I'm a builder.
Don't look too far into the credentials, but they're definitely there. I got statute of limitations. I qualified in 2000. Went into obstetrics and gynecology. Loved it. Worked in obstetrics and gynecology pretty much exclusively from 2000 to about 2012, and then the landscape in Irish medicine changed quite substantially in 2012, and again more recently. I wasn't really happy with it, and I was kind of not looking to take on a consultancy job. And honestly, obstetrics is a tough gig. It really is. You're working a lot of hours. It's very rewarding. Working on the labour ward is incredibly rewarding, but it's tough. You are doing, like when we were doing obstetrics and gynecology back in the day, you were doing the proper 38-hour shifts, and they were full on 30. That's not like, you take a break for a second. No, you started and you went and then you stopped. I said, look, I don't know if I want to do this forevermore. I didn't want to leave the country, and I had an opportunity to work. A friend of a friend approached me and said, listen, I'm starting up a fertility clinic. Would you be interested in coming on board? And I said, listen, I know nothing about fertility, because oddly enough, fertility falls under the purview of obstetrics and gynecology. But when you do obstetrics and gynecology, in Ireland anyway, you really don't learn about fertility, and you certainly don't learn about IVF, because IVF only exists at present in the private sector. So no public doctors are doing IVF. There's some of them, but they're doing it in a private capacity, if you follow me.
Okay.
So I knew nothing about it. So I had to kind of not quite start from zero, but I said, right, listen, we'll give it a shot. I went into that in 2012, 2013, and took to it like a duck to water. Loved the work.
And why did you love it? Like, what is there to love?
I've always loved my job. I'm incredibly blessed in that regard. I love patient contact. And I love focused medicine. I love a goal focus, as opposed to, management of chronic illness is incredibly important, and the work that people do in that is, I struggle with it because the goal is so intangible, but for this, we're all on the same page, and the patients are so compliant. Like, you're all on the same page. Do you know what it's like trying to, even pregnant women? Do you know how many pregnant women take the antibiotics you prescribe?
Oh, no, I know that as well. Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, and you're not giving them for your own sake, It's like, your chest is filling up with goop. You need to take the antibiotics, So, but infertility.
They're gold star patients, aren't they?
Oh, there's nobody even comes close. We tell people to the minute when to take injections, and they do it.
Yeah.
And they feel terrible if they're 3 minutes out. These people, let's do what they're told. What a terrible expression. But you all have the same goal. And look, making babies is incredibly rewarding. Doctors are, it's not fair to say all doctors are egomaniacs, but there's a
I'd be killed if I said that. It's okay if you say that.
But there would certainly, it's a very validating job. You have people telling you you've changed their lives. That's very, very validating. I mean, my wife and my kids my friends keep me a bit more grounded, but my patients certainly wouldn't, but you make such an impactful, positive change in their life. That's incredibly rewarding. And anybody who tells you that's not rewarding, or they don't feel personally validated by it, they're lying to you, because it's incredibly validating. So the work is incredibly rewarding. And that's when it goes well. When it doesn't go well, when cycles fail, and they do, it is incredibly rewarding to be able to engage in a conversation where fertility treatment should end either with the family being complete or with the woman or couple being comfortable they've done everything they should do. There's value in that. Maybe not in the immediacy of a negative cycle, but down the line that they tried, they left it all out there. I think there's enormous value in that as well. So to be part of that is an absolute privilege, to be able to share that journey, to be able to be honest and clear and candid. I'd like to think at this point I've got a reputation in the field for that, for being honest, for just being very transparent.
You absolutely do.
Just being straight,
Do you know what I've heard about you? Because my sister has been to you, and she has been successful, thankfully. And she told me she actually phoned me last night. She goes, I know you're talking to John tomorrow, and you can mention our success on your podcast.
That's right, yeah.
Too many people don't talk about the fact that they've had IVF. So and what she said was, you were dead straight, but you were kind with your words, because sometimes I think if you're on the other end, and you've said this a million times, John, to people, and you're just telling them, but if there isn't a kindness there, it can be taken in a really harsh manner, particularly if you're telling them someone it's 4-5%.
Yes.
So I think
absolutely.
That.
And I think that's something that medicine is starting to grow up to a little bit. I think the divide between the doctor and the patient is probably narrowing. I think more and more doctors are treating patients like human beings now. I'm lucky though. I'm working in private healthcare. Okay. I have time. I have opportunity. I am able to change things. If I see a problem, I can fix it. I know that people working at the coalface on the public side of things aren't afforded, and I certainly, when I worked in the HC, wasn't always afforded the opportunity to have those conversations, to have those human interactions that let the patient know that you do care about the outcome.
Yeah.
That you are not all in it together. That's naive, but that, it means something to you as well. There was a journal article a couple of weeks back, women's birth experiences. Did you see it?
Yeah.
It was horrific. It was horrific. My God, it was horrific. And also, sadly, unsurprising. And all of these women having terrible traumatic experiences. And an awful lot of that trauma could be helped or alleviated. Look, there are things that happen in the context of that type of medicine which are traumatic, no question about it.
Yeah.
But a lot of that trauma can be alleviated by a correct debrief afterwards, by a kind word or a meaningful conversation after the fact, where you're all on the same page and you're walking the person through it and you're having that conversation. But they don't have time to do that. There's another trauma happening over in room 3. What her trauma's done. She's got to go home with her baby now.
Yeah.
We got this to deal with, and it's a resourcing issue.
And it's almost like the baby's out, the baby's alive and healthy, the woman's healthy, off you go. But it's the psychological damage afterwards.
You're damaged psychologically. Yeah, sorry for you. I'm needed over here.
Yeah.
And they are needed over there. So it's not that they don't care. It's that the systems aren't, but the system isn't designed to afford kindness in that way. It's time consuming and it's expensive to provide that, So it's easier. I can pick up the phone. I can manage my time better in that space. And it just gives that opportunity. I do think a lot can be accomplished in a small time frame as well, though. Kind word goes a long way, and just acknowledging that these are tough conversations, acknowledging to people that nobody in their right mind wants to be in a fertility clinic. Hey, delighted to see you here. They don't want to be there.
Yeah. They're
going to get out to the car park and they're going to break down in tears as soon as they get out there. Yeah. They're holding it together, but at least acknowledging that makes a difference.
Yeah. So you're working in a bigger clinic, or not a bigger clinic, but you were working initially 12 years ago in a clinic.
Oh yeah. So I was working. Yeah. I started work in Sims. That's where I started. And I worked there from 2013, give or take, to 2020. I was the medical director there for a number of years as well. And then it was time for a change. And then we started Therapy Fertility. This is where I got to talk about Therapy Fertility for a little bit. The mission when we started Therapy Fertility was to provide affordable, accessible, transparent care. I had felt that the landscape in Ireland and indeed around the world, in Australia and the UK, was, what's that word? Disruption. Was ripe for disruption. The technology in IVF and ICSI has progressed substantially over the last decade. There are now more affordable ways to deliver a very high standard of care than there were previous to that. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to take those technological innovations and we wanted to apply them in a clear and coherent fashion. We wanted to look at, when we started the clinic, we had a lab manager from one clinic, we had a doctor from another clinic, we had a nurse manager from another clinic. So we all kind of sat down together. We sat down outside because we opened during COVID, so the building was still being constructed. We weren't allowed to be inside because of social distancing. Sitting outside in Carrickmines on the green, going through what makes a good cycle. What did you guys do that you felt made a good cycle? What did you guys do that you felt made a good lab? What did you guys do? And looking to, it wasn't invention at all. It's just it's barely innovation. It's just taking the best aspects from a number of different things, stripping out what you think is unnecessary, making it streamlined, making it efficient, and making it effective, and then passing that on to the patient.
So what kind of thing is unnecessary that would take a cost out? That's what, because when I thought of therapy initially, because when I was helping my sister try and decide who to go to, I thought therapy and I thought, aesthetic care.
Yes.
And because also it looked like you were given good value for money. I thought, God, how good are they if they're giving that good value for money?
That's the single biggest challenge we've had. Okay. In 3 years, that's the single biggest challenge we've had.
It's like, if I spend more money, will my success rate for pregnancy be better?
The natural inclination is to say, absolutely.
Yeah.
My God, isn't that how everything goes? And we know it's not how everything works, If you come into the clinic, if you see the clinic, it's lovely. It doesn't look cheap. It doesn't look low end. It looks gorgeous. We're really, really happy with it. And that goes a long way to kind of dispelling that concern that you're getting some kind of, for want of a better term, yellow pack or
I was going to
Ryanair.
say,
The words you can't, the words you're not allowed to say. Oh, it's really, you know, and dispelling the whole one size fits all thing, which is something I'll speak to in a minute. We have done an enormous amount of work to try to dispel that notion that somehow if you pay less, you get less, because it's not the case. It's not the case. We're very happy with our success rates. We're very transparent about our success rates. There's no mechanism in Ireland by which you can compare your success rates to another fertility clinics in Ireland, because we don't have a national framework for this. We're going to get one. We don't have a national framework which requires clinics to publish their success rates. So we decided from the outset that we're going to be transparent about our success rates, and we publish them every year. We've just recently published our statistics. And what we're doing is we're using the same format and mechanism as they use in the UK, where they have legislative oversight. There's the HFEA, the Human Fertilization Embryo Authority, who governs and regulates all IVF clinics in the UK. And this organization insists that clinics publish their success rates in a certain specific way. We have published our success rates in that way.
Okay.
Right? And hopefully we'll all be doing that in the fullness of time. That's great. Be nice and open about it. So we're saying, look, don't judge me on price, don't use success rate. Success. So very happy. What makes it better? Well, it's a little tougher to say. I think there's a lot of stuff that happens in fertility cycles which is probably not necessary. There's a thing called add-ons. There's an awful lot of add-ons in fertility. This is a phrase that gets used an awful lot. An add-on is something that's not a core part of the cycle, that costs money, that changes the process slightly, and may be of benefit improving your chances of success, right? So somebody will do a cycle and it won't work. They'll come back, they'll have a conversation and go, okay, right, look, we'll do another cycle, but this time we're going to use these add-ons. All right. Now, for me, that sparks two conversations straight away. The first is, if these are so bloody useful, why the hell are you only mentioning them to me now?
Yeah.
Would be my first question. And the second is, do they work? And when you ask, do they work, you'll be told the evidence is unclear, we're not certain, but they won't do any harm. Might do some help. And don't you want to look back and say, look at it and say you throw everything at it? So the HFEA, the UK website, has a list of these add-ons, has a website devoted to them. Are they green, orange, or red in terms of evidence base? Yeah, there ain't no green on that website. It's all orange and red, because they haven't been proven. So we said right from the outset, if something does not have evidence-based value to it, we're not doing it. We're not offering it. There's a suite of investigations that are done relatively routinely for people with recurrent miscarriage failure or recurrent implantation failure where the embryos aren't taken, things like that every other clinic would do. You've had 2 negative transfers, we're going to do this test, this test, this test. I'm not doing any of them. You just did them all for years. Don't do them anymore, because the evidence says the live birth rate isn't any different between doing them and not doing them. So I'm not doing them.
Okay, and those investigative procedures, they'd be like investigating why the embryo may not stick or something like that.
And there's various reasons why they're not of any particular great value. We can go into that, but we're just going on the evidence base. This isn't me saying, I know better than everybody else. I certainly don't. It's me looking at what the international organizations, the European International Organization, the British one and the American one, are saying about these treatments. They're going, yeah, don't do them. They're not of value. Stop doing them. Please, for the love of God, stop doing them. So we don't do them. The other thing that happens is we're very restricted. So there's things we do. We'll do IUI, intrauterine insemination, IVF, ICSI. We'll use donor sperm. We'll do egg freezing and sperm freezing. They're kind of, for want of a better term, the product lines that we'll do. There's a bunch of things we don't do. We don't do egg donation, and we don't do genetic screening of embryos.
Why?
Because they're complicated. They are of incredible value. I've built PGTA programs in the past. I've worked in egg donation for years. And I think for people who need them, they are incredibly valuable resources. Just today, literally today, I saw a couple, young couple, had been trying to conceive for a year, have had 2 miscarriages in the last year. So they were asking about miscarriage investigations. They'd done some. We did some baseline stuff, looked at her ovarian reserve, looked at a sperm, looked at his DNA fragmentation, things like that, basic stuff. And they said, so look, do we do a cycle? And I said, there's no point in you doing a cycle with me. There's no advantage. I'm not going to get you pregnant any faster than you're going to get pregnant yourself. So there's
Really?
well, there isn't any advantage. She's getting pregnant. IVF isn't going to help her get more pregnant. She's getting pregnant already.
Okay.
The only thing, she has two options. One is keep trying, let the dice fall where they may. Hope she dodges that. She's got a miscarriage risk now of about 35%, about a 65% chance of avoiding a miscarriage. Try.
Does it increase the more miscarriages you have?
Can do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The best predictor of future success is previous success, and vice versa. Or her other option is to do IVF, but with genetic screening. Screen the embryos. Tell you if the embryos are chromosomally normal or not. And I said, that will reduce your miscarriage risk. That is the only thing. It'll knock it down to about 15%. So what she has to decide now is whether or not that's worth the 11 grand.
Okay.
Which is a tough gig, tough spot to be in. And they'll go away and they'll think about it, but there's no point in me treating her. So for people who need it, genetic screening of embryos can be incredibly valuable. But it's very technical, it's very fiddly, and what's happened in a lot of centres is they were built to do X, Y, and Z. All right, we've built this lab, we're doing X, Y, and Z in this lab. And then the game shifts a little bit, new technologies come in, new products come in, and then you go, you know what? Some guy said, we also want to do A, B, and C. So now you're doing X, Y, and Z, and we're doing A, B, and C, and it'll be fine. Now you've got a couple of problems. Straight away, the lab has become a messier, more disorganized system. You're doing A, B, and C, but you were never really set up to do A, B, and C in the first place. You know, you weren't built with that in mind. So it's kind of been shoehorned in. So are you doing it as well as you could be? You haven't been purpose-built to deliver that. The other problem, and this is where people really don't like to think about this, the more new stuff you bring into an environment, the more you compromise the existing things in there. The lab environment is incredibly technical. It's all time and motion. How long is the embryo sitting in that dish? What's the temperature? What's the carbon dioxide level? How many people are walking by? All these things create real and tangible changes, which ultimately will impact on success rates. So the more streamlined you are and the less you do, the better off you are and the better success rates you deliver within that framework. So the less I do, the less we offer, the better off we are at delivering success within that range. And honestly, most people don't need genetic screening of embryos. Most people don't need egg donation. For those people who do need those things, they should go to a centre that does an awful lot of it because they're specialists in that area.
It's the old adage, isn't it? If you're doing something all day, every day, you're really good at it.
Absolutely. The more focused you are, the better off you are at delivering. So we do IVF and ICSI, which is more than enough for 80% of the fertility patient population out there. And because we're only doing that, we're doing it very, very well. There was a thing that used to happen, and some centres are still doing it, where you could do a transfer on day 3 or you could do a transfer on day 5. Okay?
Right. The transfer is the embryo being transferred into the uterus.
So you've taken eggs, you've taken sperm, and you've made embryos. That's day 0. Day 1 is the next day, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. In the past, when IVF first started, we were putting embryos back very early because we didn't have the technology to keep them out in the lab for longer, right? Gradually, the technology has progressed, and now the lab is a perfectly fine environment for the embryo until day 5 or day 6. Perfectly fine. But there's still centres out there that do day 3 transfers. Why might you do a day 3 transfer? Well, you've got somebody who's done a cycle, and they did a cycle, you got an embryo, but the embryo died before it got to day 5. So now you've taken them back in and you've done another cycle, and you've taken an egg and you've taken a few eggs, and you've made an embryo, you only have one embryo, and it's day 3, and it's not looking brilliant. It's looking okay on day 3, but it's not looking brilliant. So what centres would often do, it's happening less now, but it's still happening from time to time, they ring the patient that, listen, come on in, we'll do a day 3 transfer. That way you've had an embryo transfer, we're putting the embryo back into its natural environment, and we're going to give it a shot. Nobody's going to say no to that, right? I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I think you should hold that embryo on to day 5 in the lab. You trust your lab. Yes, you trust your lab. So if you trust your lab, you hold the embryo in the lab until day 5. You were a day 5 embryo once. I was a day 5 embryo once. This is a step your embryo has to get through in order to become a pregnancy in a person. And if it doesn't make it to day 5 in the lab, it wasn't going to work in you. I'm not going to inflict an extra 2-week wait on you to find out if it worked or not by checking a pregnancy test. And also, I'm not going to lose the extra information that I would have got by holding the embryo out and looking at it for another 2 days versus putting it back in the womb. So the other problem that creates is that for every time you do an egg collection, every time you have a patient, you now have to have a discussion with the lab. Are we doing a day 3 transfer? Are we doing a day 5 transfer here? Well, we're probably doing a day 5 transfer, but unless it goes badly. If it goes badly, then we might pivot and do a day 3 transfer and all this. It's messy and it's compromising success rates. What we decided at the start was we are only going to do blastocyst day 5 transfers. We're never going to do a day 3 transfer. We're going to mind the embryos very carefully. We're going to put them in time-lapse incubators that take photos of them. They're really cool. So you don't have to take them out and look at them. We're just going to contain them for 5 days. And if you get an embryo at the end of it, brilliant. And if you don't, we get as much information as we can from the cycle, which is the secondary goal of any IVF cycle, is to learn. Obviously, the primary goal is to give them success. The second, if you can't achieve that, then all you can get from it is value and knowledge, which helps you direct the conversation about where they should go from there.
And in general, when the embryos are growing from between day 1 and 5, no one touches them or does anything with them at all.
So what used to happen was you would have the embryos in an incubator, look like a big fridge. It's not a fridge, obviously, because that would be not good. Yeah, they don't do well.
I was like,
yes, but it looks like a fridge.
Yeah,
it's got the big door and the handle and all the rest. And every day you would take the embryo out and you'd look at it under a microscope, you'd grade it and you'd put it back in. There were a couple of problems with that. The first problem is that you're only seeing the embryo once a day. So you're missing an awful lot of information. The second problem is that you're subjecting the embryo to small but real changes in light and heat and carbon dioxide and oxygenation and humidity levels as you take it out and put it back in. So that's a stressor for the embryo. Embryos don't like being stressed. So now what we have, most centers are using now, is time-lapse imaging, where you put the embryo in a little well and there's a camera situated over it. And it takes photos of the embryo every 10 minutes. So you never touch the embryo. You just look at the video feed on the screen.
Okay.
It's a box. Those incubators cost about $250,000 each. They are not cheap.
How many do you have running at the one time?
3.
Okay.
We just bought our
How much
third.
debt are you in, John?
So it's a significant capex. But yeah, we just bought our third embryoscope because, and this speaks to that actually, we said at the start, we don't, and this is the add-on conversation. What a lot of clinics were doing, less so now, but we're doing is they would say, right, you can put your embryos in a standard incubator or you can put them in this newer incubator.
I mean, what the hell? That's just mean.
But they were new and the clinic had just spent $250,000 on this box. Okay. So they had to pay for it. And so, so that's what happened, is that this would be an add-on. Okay. And this is something you can choose to use or not. But good luck saying no to it. I mean, that's horrific, right?
Oh.
So we said, right, when we start this, you've got your cycle cost. That's going to include this, and this. Nobody can pay more in our clinic for a perceived better standard of care. You get evidence-based, solid care. And if you don't want that, we are not the organization for you. And we're very, very clear and transparent about that right up. So everybody goes into time-lapse incubation. Everybody goes to day 5. In the past, other clinics would charge for that, growing the embryo for the extra 2 days to get that knowledge, because it was an expensive thing to do. But now the technology's caught up. Now it's not more expensive to do. Now you can build that into the cycle. So that's what I'm very proud of, is that you can't come back and go, oh, look, maybe you should have an endometrial scratch or something like that. Maybe there's none of that. We go on the evidence. What it does mean is that when the next big advancement comes along and changes success rates, I'll probably be late to the party. Other clinics will adopt it before I do. I'm okay with that, because if you go back over the last 10 years and you look at everything that's come along, you'd have been right not to do it.
Right.
Okay. So far history is very much on the side of the just wait.
And our advances are products, like you call them products, but it's more like a service, or it's more like
it's both. Some are immediate that the embryos sit in. Like there was a great example. This is one of my favorite stories, is there was a thing called endometrial scratch. Endometrial scratch started up in about maybe 2008, 2009, really got some traction, took off around 2013, 2014. And very, very famously, there was an article in the Mail on Sunday, great paper, on the Mail on Sunday, which the front page, what was revolutionary new procedure in IVF increases success rates by 300%. That was the claim.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Everybody was using endometrial scratch. And the theory was somebody noticed that if somebody had a hysteroscopy, a look inside the womb with a camera, and a DNC, a clear of the womb, that maybe their success rates were higher if they had an embryo transfer within 3 months of doing that. And the theory was that irritating the lining of the womb made it more receptive in the following month. Solid theory, a lot of evidence started to come out, and then suddenly everybody said, right, this is why embryo implantation is failing. We need to do endometrial scratch. And we were all at it. Everybody was doing it.
When you say scratch, you usually just like nick the
Yeah, a little,
lining.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not the nicest thing in the world, don't get me wrong, but it's quick. And everybody was doing it. Everybody was doing it. We were all at it, like bunnies. And started doing it. And gradually data started seeping through. And as more and more of these things were done, we started to build a better picture of whether or not it was helping or not. And it wasn't. It wasn't helping. It wasn't improving things. People are still doing it because, hey, it's an extra 250, 300 euro, right? Patient gets to feel better. She's read about it. If I don't say it and you come in to me and go, well, what about this scratch thing? Okay, yeah, let's do that. Bingo. Okay, everybody wins, right? And then I think it was 2018, the same newspaper, headline, front page, IVF clinics charging money for unproven medical add-on. And it was about endometrial scratch. The same paper, two different headlines, 5 years apart. One being ridiculously overzealous about the potential benefit of something that was utterly unproven, and the other vilifying clinics for using it. And I just thought, again, that's just marvelous, isn't it? That's the world we're in. It makes it really, really difficult if you're a clinic that offers this stuff, that does this stuff, even if I have you in front of me as a patient and I don't think it's of benefit to you, if you ask for it, I'm not going to say no. I can't. It's not reasonable. So you're going to, even if I don't think it's going to help, it's going to cost you some money. You get to feel better. I get to feel better. My CFO is happy because he's got a product line that's making him some money. It's all very commercial, but it's not helping you get more pregnant. So it's really dangerous to offer these things when you know that the evidence base for them isn't rock solid.
And how is it allowed then to happen? Because usually within medicine, it has to be evidence-based, yeah?
Well, I mean, here's the problem. It's going to take 5 years.
Yeah.
So suppose scratch had turned out to be really viable. Shouldn't you have done it back in 2013? Again, these are vulnerable people. They want to... And it's not malice. It's not. And it's not perhaps as venal as I've made it out to be. I think a lot of these things are well-intentioned. People are trying their best to get struggling couples across the line. I do think there's a commercialization aspect to this stuff where things get pushed out to market before they're ready, before they've been proven. But that's because the desire on patients' part as well. This is being driven as much from the patient population as it is by the company that's making the stuff. It's all a lovely little symbiotic quagmire. And that's how it happens. And once you kind of break the seal on that and you allow yourself to go, okay, look, we don't have to wait for proper, very hard to get, robust evidence for this. We can just try it. And we can counsel the patients. And we do counsel the patients in these situations. Certainly, look, I don't have evidence that this will work. I don't have evidence this is going to increase your chance of having a baby. All I have is some soft data here which might trend in a vague direction. But hey, it's not going to do any harm. Might do some good. Sure, don't you want to know that you've done everything? And that's it. And again, it's not malice, but that philosophy, that ideology leads you down a very, very, very dangerous road. So we decided we're just not playing that game anymore. If it's not evidence-based, we're not doing it. If we think it is evidence-based, and the thing we think the value in it, it's already included in your cycle. You don't even need to worry about it. I don't need to have somebody ask me, well, should I put my embryos in a time-lapse incubator? Should I take my embryos to day 5? I'm not even having that conversation. It's automatic. It's part of the cycle. It's built in. And in doing that, It allows us to streamline our processes, which comes back to the original point. And the more streamlined and efficient you are, the better off you are delivering consistent success. There's this expression, patients gets very, very angry with it. I just felt like I was on a conveyor belt. And I don't want anybody to feel like they're on a conveyor belt. I don't want anybody to feel like they're a number. I want everybody to feel seen and acknowledged, and I want them to trust an organization. But I kind of do want them on a conveyor belt. I want them on a conveyor belt that spits out babies. That's a good conveyor belt to get on, you know? And it's not one size fits all, but there are analogous processes that run in parallel. And if you can get on board with those processes, and those processes have been shown to deliver consistent high success rates, then they're good. And fine, there might be one little edge case that needs something different, but managing that case and managing it properly without compromising that specific complex case and also compromising a whole bunch of other cases, I've never seen it be able to be done, not properly. The more complexity you bring into the lab, the more conversation you have to have. Is this person having a scratch? Is this person day 3 transfer or day 5 transfer? Is this person having embryo glue? Is this? The more complexity you bring into it, the worse your success becomes. Okay. And everybody wants to be special. Everybody wants to be the edge case where, do you know what, we need to kind of Dr. House MD this and put all the pieces of both together. But no, generally speaking, and this is a tough thing to hear, is you just need to make eggs, get eggs, make embryos, make them safely, make them securely, make them in a very, very safe, coherent environment, and then do transfers of those embryos. That's how you get success.
Okay. And how many embryos fit in one of those incubators at any one time?
That's a great question. I should know the answer. So we do egg collections 3 days a week, and now we have a Wednesday, a Thursday, and a Friday incubator. So we can handle, I think, 16 patients on any one day. So we're not there yet. So okay. we're not full. We bought the third incubator before we fully needed it, just like we bought the second incubator before we fully needed it, because we wanted just that expansion space.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then can I ask you about egg freezing in younger women?
Yeah.
Because you spoke about these tech companies that are being very forthcoming about trying to help women through cycles, etc. And some of them have offered their younger female cohort egg freezing so they can, and you know, people come out and said, oh, you're just offering this.
So the lesson they've learned is you should be careful about that, yes, right?
Yeah.
I felt, you shouldn't ever feel bad for Amazon or Apple. You know, if you find yourself in that position, you check it. I do feel they weren't necessarily being taken at face value on that. I don't think offering young women social egg freezing is a way of trying to get them to put off having their family. I do think if you're going to offer social egg freezing as a product, as a work incentive, you also need to have very robust maternity leave and parental support and creches. You need to get that squared away first before you offer that. You know, if you just do that and you don't do that, then you're monsters. Absolutely. But the idea is that as you get older, your egg quantity and quality decline from 34 onwards. So if you know for a fact, and you're full sure, one, that you mightn't even want children or that you don't want them for years, the idea is that you're throwing away thousands of eggs, that by giving you the first half of an IVF cycle, stimulating the ovaries to produce eggs and then collecting those eggs, you can give yourself, I'm not going to say insurance policy because it's not, but give yourself an option in the future should you run into problems and should you want to use them. Most frozen eggs are never used. Either they're frozen by people who aren't certain they want children, or they're frozen by people who want children, then find a relationship and try more traditional systems to get their baby in the first place.
Okay.
Right? That's good news. But for those people who want to freeze eggs, who want to kind of put some effort, financial and physical effort, into potentially addressing shortfalls down the line, it can be very, very valuable. What's made social egg freezing possible is newer advances. Even back as 2013, 2014, we were slow freezing eggs and embryos. And the problem with slow freezing is, you know, when you put ice cubes in the tray in your freezer and you take them out and they're cloudy and they've got cracks in them, that's because as the water cools, it fractures and shears and you get stress points. And that's because the water is cooling down slowly and non-directionally. Okay? And what we have now is newer freezing techniques called vitrification, again from the Latin, turning to glass. And it's snap freezing, and it's preventing ice crystal formation in the eggs and the embryos. And it means they freeze and thaw much better. Embryos have a thaw survival rate of over 99%. Eggs have a thaw survival of 80 to 90%. And eggs are very fragile, delicate little things. In the past, they had a thaw survival rate of 40 to 50%, which makes egg freezing functionally pretty useless if you're going to lose over half of them every time you freeze them. So that's what's made egg freezing really possible in the last kind of 8 or 9 years, is that newer freezing techniques, vitrification. So the idea is you can freeze eggs and hold them. For anybody contemplating egg freezing, there are 2 critical questions to try to ask and answer. The first is, how many eggs are we going to get? And we try to answer that question with the tests we do, the ovarian reserve test, things like blood test, AMH, or natural follicle count. We try to zero in, are we going to get 1 to 5 eggs? Are we going to get 5 to 10? Are we going to get 12 to 15? Are we going to get 15 to 20? Whatever, okay? And then the second question we ask is, are they any good? What's the likelihood of a live birth rate for each egg frozen? And as I said earlier, the highest number I quote on that is 3.5%. For somebody who's 33 years old, we freeze an egg, it's 3.5% chance of having a baby with that egg.
And is there less of a chance of having a baby with a frozen egg than with a fresh egg?
You have the loss rate from freezing and thawing the egg. The thaw survival rate's 80 to 90%.
Okay.
So you've got 10 to 20% hit right there. Okay. But once it's thawed, should be okay. As you get older, that live birth rate per egg drops. At 40 years old, it's 1%, which doesn't sound like a big drop. 3.5 to 1%, it's still both small numbers. But if you have 10 eggs frozen at 30 years old, you've got a 35% chance of having a baby with those eggs. Okay?
Yeah.
If you've got 20 eggs frozen, you've got a 70% chance. Okay? If you're 40 years old and you've got 10 eggs frozen, you have a 10% chance. If you've 20 eggs frozen, you have a 20% chance.
But is that if you've 10 eggs frozen, when you are 40, you get them frozen? It's not.
It's the age you were when you froze the eggs,
That's fine.
not when you use them.
That's grand,
So
yeah.
a 30-year-old who freezes eggs at 30 and uses them at 40 is at 70%.
She has the same chances as a 30. Okay, that's
and
fine.
now you see the value of egg freezing.
Absolutely. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
My goodness.
So, and like,
it's all percentages and statistics, isn't it?
I hate to be so metric about it, but that's how you have to be. It really is. And I think what I love, and the drum I've been beating for years, is about awareness. It gets set up, oh, you just want every physics. No, I don't. What I do want is women 25 years old and older to be fertility aware. And I think getting your ovarian reserve checked, simple blood test, AMH, something like that, is a really, really, really good idea for all women. And if it's normal, boolabus more, off you go. Don't darken the door. I don't want to see you again. Okay? Go. If it's low, you have options because you're younger. If there is only one common thread amongst all women who are attending fertility clinics for fertility treatment, it is this. They will all say, if I had known then what I know now.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, the children and the offspring of women and couples who have gone through fertility treatment are going to be fertility aware in a way you wouldn't even believe.
Yeah.
And that should tell you something. So I love the idea of people not having to learn through tragedy.
Yeah.
I love the idea of women being aware, having ownership, having agency, and making a decision about what way they want their life to go. And if your ovarian reserve is low, then maybe do something about that, or maybe change your priority matrix, or maybe come to peace with that. Then you have options. But as you get older, those options tend to shrink. They just do. They shrink organically, and you start to eventually run out. And the lament will be, I wish I had done it earlier. Most women who contemplate egg freezing are doing so because they know somebody who's done it. It's all word of mouth. It really is. It's crazy. I know somebody. And most people who go through egg freezing, I would say the mean interval time between thinking about egg freezing and doing egg freezing is 2 years. It takes 2 years to start to think about it to actually going and doing it if you're going to go and do it. So that the early, if I can get that 2-year clock to start when they're 30, those women are a hell of a lot better off than if that 2-year clock starts at 35.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
But I just like that awareness and doing the tests. Doing tests doesn't mean you have to go through. That was the other thing we decided we were going to do a little bit differently, is that an initial consultation with us, see one of the nurses, is free. It's free. Get a free cup of coffee. Come in, have a chat, fill out some forms. They'll talk you through your options. If you have testing done, yeah, you're going to have to pay for that. If you do a blood test, you got to pay for that. Do a scan, you got to pay for that. That's fair enough. But the advice, this information, that'll all just be given to you. And then you can elect to do with that what you will. We're not trying to upsell. We're not genuinely. Like I said, I turn a lot of people away and say, you don't need to do this, you don't. And I think that's one of the fears that people have about engaging with fertility testing and treatment is that they're coming in and they're going to be sold the spinning rims, and it's not like that. Listen, if somebody doesn't need fertility treatment, tell them, go away. I don't want to see you. I don't want to see you for 6 months. I don't want to see you for a year. If you're still having trouble then, come back to me. But you're young, you're healthy, nothing wrong with you. Off you go.
Okay.
The last thing you want to do is weaponize somebody's enthusiasm and motivation to be fertility aware against them. And given that the drum I've been banging on for years is I want more and more people to get tested, I certainly don't ever want that to be used. Oh, you're just looking to get... No, I'm not looking to get them into treatment. I just want them to be aware.
So it's to test their egg reserve. But does that tell you about their egg quality? Can you not tell? You can't tell an egg quality until you have that egg in your petri dish. Is that right?
Even then, you still don't know. It's a good egg if it turns into an embryo. It's a good egg if that embryo turns into a pregnancy and a live birth. You came from a good egg. So did I.
Yeah.
Do you know how you can tell? You're a person. That's how you can tell if it's an egg is good or not. Like, remember that DNA frag test I spoke about on sperm? You could do that on eggs. You could theoretically do that on eggs, but it would destroy them. So you don't do that. If you take an egg out, there are various things you could do to try to determine the quality of that egg. Some would be destructive, some not. But the very best thing you can do with that egg to see if it's good, try to turn it into a person.
Okay.
That's how you test it.
And then does genetic testing, could it sometimes interfere with the embryo?
Yes. So that's the other thing. So pre-implantation, now look, I don't do pre-implantation genetic testing in therapy fertility. Okay. So maybe take everything I say with a pinch of salt, but I've done it in the past. What you do with PGTA, standard aneuploidy testing, not looking for cystic fibrosis or single cell gene defects or anything, this is just general embryo testing, is you take the embryo out to the blastocyst stage, and a blastocyst has a ring of cells around the outside that's going to form the placenta and the membranes. It's got an inner cell mass that's going to form the baby and some fluid on the inside. What you do is you take your embryo out to the blastocyst stage, and just before you freeze it, you take off a collection of 8 to 10 cells. All right, and then you freeze the embryo. Then you freeze these 8 to 10 cells, you send them off to a laboratory and you test them. You look for the chromosomal pairs in those cells. So we all have 23 pairs of chromosomes, 23XX for female traditionally, 23XY for male. You with me so far? Mm-hmm. Most people have heard of this. The best analogy I have for this is imagine a bookshelf with 23 pairs of books on it. Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, Volume 4, Volume 5, all the way through. 23 pairs of books. Inside each of these books is a dense, heavy text, and that text is the blueprint for how to make and maintain a human being. Okay? This test looks at the bookshelf and tells you if there is any missing or extra books. And if there are missing or extra books or missing or extra chromosomes, you're probably not going to be viable. Okay? Most chromosomal abnormalities, like an extra copy of chromosome 16 or a missing copy of chromosome 10, are lethal. The pregnancy will either not implant or will fail before 6 weeks. Okay? So by doing that test, you can tell from your selection of embryos which are the definitively abnormal embryos. Okay? And what you're left with is your normal embryos. Now, let's be very, very aware that your normal embryo isn't necessarily normal. All you've done is look at the bookshelf. There might be a problem within the books which you're not picking up. So PGTA, genetic screening, is of negative value, which is still value. It's of negative value in the sense that it excludes the definitively abnormal embryos from the pool. What's the likelihood of having an abnormal embryo? Well, if you're 33, 34 years old, about half of your embryos will be abnormal. If you're 40 years old, maybe 80, 90% of your embryos will be abnormal. Okay? So that's the advantage of genetic testing, is that it doesn't increase your overall live birth rate, because if you test the embryo or don't test the embryo, you can test the embryo by putting it back in the womb, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. You with me?
Yeah.
But maybe you're reducing that patient's risk of miscarriage by not putting back an embryo that's definitively abnormal. So that's the advantage. What's the disadvantage? Well, the disadvantage is threefold. The first is you have to be careful about managing people's expectations. Regardless of how much you have this speech with them, they will still skip off out of the room when you tell them the embryo is normal, as if the kid is already in college. Okay? People run away with themselves on this.
Yeah.
So trying to drag them back down on that is challenging. The second problem is cost. Functionally, it's going to double the cost of your cycle. So I can do twice as many cycles without it as with it. So I have given that person twice the chance to have a baby. Yes, I've exposed them to risk of miscarriage and pregnancy loss and stuff like that, but I've also doubled their chance of having a baby. You with me?
Yes.
For the same financial cost, not physical or emotional cost, let's be very clear, but financial cost. And then the third thing is around the PGTA itself. It is to speak to the question you asked. There is a very small risk of damage to the embryo by doing that biopsy, but that's less than 1%. The embryo is quite robust and it'll do well. There is, and this is something that's not talked about enough in the PGTA world, I think. There is about a little over 2% chance that you're going to get a wrong result from your biopsy. That most embryos will have some degree of abnormal cells in them, and those abnormal cells get preferentially pushed to the outside of the embryo. And so there's a chance you'll pick up a clump of cells that will test as abnormal, but actually that was just one small little patch of abnormal cells in an otherwise normal embryo. But you'll never know, because that embryo will be graded as abnormal and it will never be transferred.
Okay.
And so if you do enough, and you need big numbers, but if you do enough of this, then maybe the corollary of that is you're going to have less babies. And that doesn't sit well with me. There are newer things coming on stream. So now there's what's out there now is called non-invasive pre-GTA, where you're taking the embryo sits in a little fluid media for 5 days. You take a sample of that fluid off, and then you look for cells in that media. Now, there's way less cells. They're not great, so it's much harder to amplify the DNA. But the idea is you're getting a selection of DNA, not just from the outside of the embryo, but from the inside of the embryo as well, so you don't have that false positive rate. The problem is it's really difficult to amplify that DNA, and so the results aren't as good. This is a perfect example of something that is undoubtedly going to be really, really good and really, really powerful and really, really useful as an embryo screening tool. And it has now already become commercialized, already being sold, and is simply not ready for market yet.
Okay.
And perfect example, so,
yeah, okay.
So I think genetic screening has absolutely a role to play in people who are producing lots of embryos but not getting pregnant. It'll give you more information. It might speed up the amount of time and work you have to put into getting across the line. But I don't think it's for everybody. And I really try to battle against this myself. I really do, but I'm sure I'm as guilty as other people. To a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you go to a centre that doesn't offer PGTA, why the hell would we talk about it? If you go to a centre that does offer PGTA, why the hell wouldn't they try to get you to do it?
Yeah.
So that's why I kind of almost, got probably killed for even thinking about it. I go out of my way to talk about it in a very detailed way, because I want to combat that natural bias, which I know I have my own natural bias, and go, listen, this is why I don't do it. I don't do it because it doesn't increase your chance of having a baby. It adds a lot of cost, and it has a tendency towards overpromising and underdelivering. But here's the advantages it might have for you.
Okay.
Now I have found, and this is almost depressing, is that when you are honest and clear and candid about it in that fashion, people tend to respond to you about it and go, I wish you did it because I want to do it, but I want to stay here. I'm like, yeah, but we don't, so
okay.
it's, but I've had people where I've said all of that and I think it might actually be a good idea for them. And they said, yeah, but we really liked the nurse when we saw her. And I said, so we know that there's risks in going ahead without doing these kind of things, but we're going to stay here with you guys anyway. And I go, listen, thanks for the vote of confidence. We'll do our level best for you, but I think what that does is, I think the practitioners in this space may possibly be well served by being very candid about the limitations of the technology.
Okay.
And I think a lot of them are, but it's complicated and it's time consuming and it takes ages. And that's one of the things, like, that comes back to that. If I'm doing consultation and I'm talking to a couple or a woman about what we can do for them. These are the 4 things that I can do for you. I don't have to spend a whole lot of time talking about this, and this.
Okay.
And it means that the information I give them is of more value because it's not spread as thin. Now I will talk to them about egg donation, I will talk to them about PGTA if they need it, but a lot of people won't come to me because they know we're very open about not doing it. They'll have seen a nurse already, and if they know full sure and full well that this is what they want, then they're never going to see me in the first place, which is fine.
Okay.
So it allows you, keeps going back, keep it simple, stupid, KISS principle. The more focused you are, as we go, right, I'm just going to talk to you about IVF, ICSI, IUI, egg freezing, sperm freezing. These are the simple, within Maria, things that we can do, and we're going to do it well.
Okay. And how does it work then in your clinic? Do you do the egg retrieval and another doctor puts the embryo in, or? So
we were very much as a team. I would have my patient cohort. There are other docs. We have 2 other doctors would have their patient cohorts as well. And if you have a query, then that query will probably make its way to your treating doctor, who will answer, and they'll draw up your treatment plan. And if things don't work out, then you come back to them. That's generally how it is. Your procedures, the scans, are primarily done by the nursing team. The egg retrievals are done by the doctor assigned to the egg retrieval center procedure room that day.
Okay.
And as are the embryo transfers. So one thing I did notice in the past, and it was something I'm really, really reluctant, because again, I've been doing this gig for a while, so I'd really like Dr. Kennedy to do my transfer, something we hear a bit, obviously. And I get it, I do. It's something we just won't do. You can't guarantee that I'll be there. For one, I'm not always there, right? I don't take much in the way of holiday, but I'm forced.
When you are on them,
I'm forced to from time to time. But I might be doing something else. And in the past, I've worked in centres, where there'd be a list of maybe 10 transfers, and there'd be 4 different doctors doing those 10. So Dr. A is going to do transfer 1 and 4. Dr. B is going to do 2 and 3. It's not that there's one doctor who's assigned to the procedure room that day to do the transfers, but that poor fool has just been kicked out because, Mrs. Smith is desperate for Dr. A to do it. And, well, frankly, Mrs. Jones won't let anybody but Dr. B anywhere near. And we've allowed that. We've facilitated that. But all you're doing is creating delay. All right. That messes up the list. And now you're changing your process. Now you're changing where your embryo is sitting. Remember that embryo sitting in the lab and it was in that game, and then they took it out because, well, the transfer scheduled at 10 past 10. So we're going to do the transfer at 10 past 10. So we're going to take the embryo out of here and put it over here on this stage. We don't want it on this stage for more than 3 minutes. We're ready to go. Okay. Oh, the doctor's not here because the doctor was never assigned to the procedure room. The doctor's up finishing up a consult upstairs. So the doctor's going to be 5 minutes late. It's okay. We'll just hang on for 5 minutes. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. That doctor will come down in a rush. It won't look rushed, but they're in a rush. They've got something else to go to. They were never supposed to be there that day. It's just, her transfer happened to fall on that day. Do the transfer. Patient feels delighted because their special, unique snowflake of a doctor did their transfer. But everything is worse. Everything is worse. Their success rate is worse. What you want to make sure is that the staff you have doing these procedures are appropriately trained, are nice, decent human beings, and that you are assessing constantly their KPIs. Are they delivering success at the same or better than everybody else? And if they're not, how is that a retraining issue? What are they doing wrong? What are they doing right? And you are constantly on that in a very, very live way. And sometimes, look, we would all see within a very narrow bandwidth, success rates go up and down. It's probably got more to do with other factors than the person, but everything leads you to the single unfortunate conclusion. The best person to do your embryo transfer is the person doing embryo transfers that day.
Okay.
That's what they're there for. They're part of that streamlined process, the conveyor belt, if you will, as opposed to unforeseen delays, artificial delays, compromises the embryo in the lab, compromises the transfer. But it doesn't look like that. And it's hard to get that point across. Well, I want to see the doctor who's been looking after me. Yeah, but if we do that, you're going to be waiting an extra 10 minutes. And the damage is
Yeah.
enormous on that. I mean, it's not enormous, but it's certainly not zero.
Basically a process. It's like QP. Like, I mean, sure, I know it from pharmacy. You have to follow
thank you.
procedures. It's like SOPs, basically.
It really is. And it's boring and it's not exciting, but it's how you get core deliverables, which is a terrible way to talk about, people and care and all, but it's a really good way to think about how a lab should run and be processed. So how everything outside the world interacts with the lab. Where are the touch points for how doctors and nurses interact with the lab? We pass tubes in to give them eggs. They pass catheters out with embryos to give to us, which we then do transfers with. They're the two key touch points. Those two touch points are incredibly complex and rigorous little dances of very, very exact timing. There are some very, very critical moments in the care of a patient going through fertility. How long is that tube of fluid containing the egg going to sit there before it gets brought in there? How long is that embryo going to sit in that incubator dish before it's transferred to a catheter and put into the uterus? Seconds count. Minutes certainly count. So the more exact and defined you are in those moments, the better off you are at delivering care. I mean, I'm a little ADD kid. I'm twitchy and fidgety. You can see that in me. But one thing I love is time and motion. I've been obsessed with that for years. And oh my God, there's people out there who are so much better than I am, but with shame. But how do you make a cup of tea? Where's your kettle? Where's your mug? Where's your milk? How do you do it properly? How fast is that? How much time should you take? When you're moving around, are you doing everything in one step, or are there ways you can optimize and make that cup of tea better and faster? And it sounds asinine when you talk about it, a cup of tea and that, but you can apply that philosophy to anything to make your process better, more efficient, more effective. And that's what we're constantly striving to do. Where are the choke points? Where are the delays? Is that delay resulting in compromise? How can we fix it? Do we need to resource here? Do we need to change this here? I can tell you to a minute, to about 20-second interval, how long an embryo transfer should take. From the time that person comes into the room to making sure they're positioned correctly in the bed, to making sure the timeout and the check-in and the checks, the person, you don't want to put the wrong embryo back in a person, it's frowned upon, but to make sure you're doing the right procedure, the right person at the right time, then to, once you sit down and you pass speculum and you identify how long to get a catheter, how long to the minute.
Like, I mean, it's a Mission Impossible operation type thing, isn't
it? It is.
It needs to
and you're going to do that 13 times.
Yeah.
Just break it down. And I don't find it boring. I find it fascinating. But I can see how other people find that QP stuff boring.
No, I love it. I love it.
I think it's how we win.
Yeah.
I personally think that's how you win.
But wasn't there a case there, and it was very sad. Maybe a year ago, there was a clinic, I think it was around the country, and something to do with their fridges or the way they were storing the embryos. The records weren't being kept. That is just heartbreaking.
Look, unfortunately, and IVF is littered with some cases, and there were cases from last year in the States of embryos being compromised by. And I mean, if you've worked in any kind of scientific or lab process, you can have all the checks in the world, and you might have a product failure at a certain point. And all you can do under those circumstances is say, right, how left of center was this? How anticipatable was this? Was this were we living on a knife edge? Was that tank leaking for a week, and it was clearly gone, or so rigorous quality control is, you need to have OCD people in your lab. You just do, and we're lucky we do, who are constantly looking at that. You need double manual witnessing. You need electronic records. You need, everybody who comes in for a procedure has a name band on, and we barcode scan them. It's got their name on it. We do a manual check, barcode scan them, and then that's what lights up on the stage. So on the big stage inside where the eggs and the sperm and the embryos are collected, that's tagged to them. And if all the dishes will have little RFID tags on them. If you put the wrong tag from somebody else, everything goes bananas.
Okay. It's like, wow. Okay, yeah.
So, and so you need that because human beings are human beings and they make mistakes. So you need 3 or 4 or 5 different layers of protection stuff, because this is critical stuff. And while you acknowledge that human beings make mistakes in this space can happen, but they're borderline unforgivable. What do you do? And if mistakes are made, how do you make that right? It can be very, very difficult. If you lose somebody's embryos, how do you make that right? It's very hard. You hope to God you can make more embryos, right?
Yeah.
Because if you can't, then you can't make them whole again. You can't. You've taken something away from them that they can never get back. So you want to be damn sure if something like that happens, is that you can look at them and go and explain, listen, everything was done. I'm really sorry that a meteor hit the building. You want to make sure that it wasn't something avoidable. You want to make sure that
it wasn't something within your control, that you've done everything
you make sure that your standards were appropriate. We're very lucky. We are, I think, right now, we're the only, might change in the future, we are the only fertility clinic around with JCI accreditation. So this is a private health, Joint Commission International. There's an American organization called the Joint Commission, which started looking at private healthcare, and they send in people to do quality assessments of your processes of your clinic, of how you manage patients, patient safety, patient care, all aspects of it. And then they launched an international arm called JCI, Joint Commission International. And you don't have to apply for this, but you can apply for this. And they come in and they do a pretty rigorous 4 or 5 day inspection, run through all your SOPs, all your processes, witness everything, look at everything, and then decide if you're eligible for it or not. Not everybody is.
And you have it.
Oh, yeah.
in spades. I want to ask you so many questions, but we'll be here all night. But I just wanted to ask you one thing. How do you decide whether or not to transfer 1 or 2 embryos into a woman?
There's a simple answer to that. The answer is 1, unless she really, really, really insists.
Okay. Why?
1 is safer.
Was it not the case years ago where they'd implant loads just to make sure 1 took?
Yes. That's not a great idea. So let's say it's 2007. You're in Calcutta. You're doing IVF. You have 9 embryos. They're all on day 3. Some are looking great, some not so great. They'll take all 9, they'll put them back in. Let's say 4 of them stick. You've got quads now. What's your next step? It's not nice. Nobody wants to see how the sausage gets made. It's selective termination. That's what you're going to do, because you don't get 4 children, so you're going to take a few of them out, maybe 2 or 3 of them out.
Okay.
And then you're going to be left with 1. That's a successful cycle, is it? I mean, I don't think so. In the past, it was never really a case of putting more than 2 back in. That was always unusual, especially with day 5 embryos, where you've proven that they're stronger.
Yeah.
Okay. In the past, with the slower freezing techniques that we touched on earlier, you would lose about 30% of your embryos. So there was enormous pressure to get those embryos back in on a fresh cycle, right? Now, with a thaw survival rate over 99%, freezing is ridiculously safe and in many, many cases more successful than fresh transfers. So there's no pressure on us to put in multiple embryos at the same time. So let's say you have 4 embryos. You do a cycle, you made 4 embryos. What's the fastest way to get that woman pregnant? Take all 4 embryos and put them back in together. She probably has a 90 to 95% chance of a positive pregnancy test. Now, we're not going to do that because that's mental, right? That's crazy to even contemplate that. But she will achieve, the idea is she'll achieve the same success rate if you do 4 single embryo transfers than 1 4 embryo transfer, right? Now, where you see that come into play in the real world is if you have somebody with 4 embryos, do they do 2 transfers of 2 embryos or do they do 4 transfers of 1 embryo to achieve resolution of all those embryos and achieve their family? We recommend going singly rather than pairs because twin pregnancy, is a high-risk pregnancy. You're more likely to have prematurity, you're more likely to have pregnancy-induced hypertension, preeclampsia, diabetes, wound infections, operative delivery, low birth weight, everything bad that can happen to you. It's more likely to happen to you in a twin pregnancy. And also, people don't get it, but if you talk to somebody who's had twins, they don't wish it on anybody. It's incredibly tough. It's incredibly, incredibly tough. And also, embryos can split. You can put 1 embryo in and there's a 1% chance it'll split into 2. embryos can split up to day 14. We're putting them in on day 5, so there's still that opportunity. So if you put 2 in and they both stick and 1 splits, you can have 3. And now you're suddenly not talking about the social cost of having to maintain. Now you're talking about extreme premature. Now you're talking about compromised children. Now you're talking about learning difficulties, cerebral palsy, the whole this is fertility. We're looking to make families here. We're not looking to destroy lives. Yeah. So, and then finally, we used to think that if you put 2 embryos back in together, they were like rooms in a house. If one took and one didn't, fine. Okay. But now there's some data, not convincing yet, but it's out there, that says the outcome in the one that sticks is different than if it had been put in on its own.
As in it's more compromised?
Slightly. That maybe the birth weight is lower, the placenta doesn't function quite as well because there was an earlier miscarriage on the other side.
Okay.
Numbers are small, I'm not convinced, but it's just another nail in the coffin of putting 2 embryos back at a time.
Okay.
There's no need to. And so we fight back hard on this. I've had 3 patients in the 3 years that we've been open, 2 or 3, move their embryos, take their embryos from my clinic, our clinic, to another clinic because I wouldn't put 2 back in.
Okay.
Now, do you think I'm being mean? Or do you not think I'm trying to act in the best? Like, these are patients where I felt their obstetric risk was simply too high, that it becomes unethical and indefensible to risk twins on these patients. Somebody else might feel different. A salute.
Okay.
That's their look at, But we do occasionally put 2 back in when somebody's had repeated failed transfers, money's tight, all the rest. There's other factors in there, but it's never something I recommend. It's something I am occasionally open to a conversation about.
Okay.
But it's never something I push and say, Joe, what you should do? You should put 2 embryos back in. That's just something. And when people do transfer 2 embryos, I drew up a consent form last year for them. It's filthy. It's awful. I mean, it's very, very blunt in saying, these are the risks.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, frankly, I really struggled to work out how anybody could read that consent form and go, yeah, this seems like a good idea, but people, people still have autonomy to an extent.
Yeah.
Like, oftentimes I said, right, if somebody comes in and they say they want to transfer 2 embryos, it's not my job to say no. It's my job to have a conversation with them about why I think that's not a good idea. Okay? And sometimes that conversation works out really well, and sometimes it doesn't, and you try to balance the risk. If somebody came in to me and said, I want to transfer 4 embryos, okay? I'm educated, I'm autonomous, I have bodily autonomy, I want to transfer 4 embryos. My job is to explain to them why that's a terrible idea, why their success rate's compromised, why their safety is compromised. If at the end of that conversation, they still say they want to transfer 4 embryos, I'm either bad at my job or they're mad.
Okay.
They are the only 2 possible explanations, because it's such a terrible idea that either I can't explain or articulate why it's such a bad idea, or they are incapable of hearing. Neither of those situations is great. Either you've got a terrible doctor or you've got a terrible patient, but something has gone badly, badly wrong in that equation. So there are lines we won't cross. For instance, somebody said, I want to transfer 3 embryos. I don't have to entertain that conversation. It's just not something we'll do, ever. If somebody says they want to transfer 2 embryos, that's a conversation I'll have. I'll always have a conversation with you and explain, look, and the first thing to ask is, okay, where's it coming from? Why are you asking that? Is this something you've read? Is this something you've heard? Is this an idea you've had? You have to be able to have these conversations. So look, let's talk to each other like we're human beings, and you tell me where you're coming from with that, and I'll tell you why I think that might be something that's reasonable to consider or something that's probably not a good idea at all. If I think there is a red line in that situation, like, okay, listen, you can't do that. You've got a heart condition. If you've got twins, there's a 50% chance you'll die. I'm not giving you a twin pregnancy. We've got enough challenges here already. Okay? If at the end of that I go, well, I want to put 2 embryos back in, I'm not doing that. That's not safe. You with me? What would you do then? Do you just say no? No, you try to fold in more expertise. You get another doctor to talk to. You get another opinion. You go, look, you try to see where they're coming from. Because most people who say they want to transfer more than 1 embryo at a time, generally they're just coming from a place of loss and damage. that they've been through. They've been through it. They've had negative transfers. They've had miscarriages, and they're just sick of it, and they
think
want
this
it
will give them
over.
the best chance.
And it's just faster, you know.
Yeah.
And then you say, okay, but what if you twins? And you can almost see them doing the first stage of grief, the bargaining thing, you know, where they're going, well, I'll take that. I'll take the. I don't want the twins, but I'll take the twins if it means I can get something. You know, it's a crazy kind of logic. So it really is just about not being draconian, trying to explain to people why freezing has gotten better, why it's more advantageous for you, for your family to do it one at a time rather than two at a time.
Okay.
You know?
Can I just ask you about women having to follow a particular diets when they're trying to, get the bees for, they have to stay off alcohol. Is that a definite?
Oh, God. So, yeah, I'm going to get into awful trouble on this one.
I know. That's why I asked you.
Alcohol and exercise. Caffeine.
Because women go off alcohol for years when they're trying for babies.
The advice from the College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists is don't drink in pregnancy. That's what they've said now. There is no known safe amount of alcohol to consume in pregnancy. Mm-hmm. Okay? That's what they're saying. They've been saying it for a few months now. And it's because you can't have a reasonable conversation about this. Okay? So the danger of that statement, of course, is that you're equating somebody who has one glass of wine once in their pregnancy with a chronic alcoholic who's drinking hand sanitizer. Yeah. They are different people who are going to have different outcomes. So, if you have a glass of wine while you are pregnant or while you are going through fertility treatment, are you going to do any harm to your chances? Almost certainly not. Almost certainly not. But let's be very clear. The advice is there is no known safe amount of alcohol. You got to live in the real world. Mm. And fertility treatment can drag on for a long time. It can be years, So how cold turkey can you go? Of course you can't binge drink. In Ireland, it's the Gerald of the Regan thing. In Ireland, it's not what we drink, it's how we drink it. Yeah. Weddings. It's binge drinking, and it's
and it's also that fear, I think, of saying, it's the public health fear of saying it's okay to have a glass. Then some people misinterpret that. And they're like, it's grand to drink loads.
And there's bad faith people who look to weaponize that against you. So it's a very, very controversial area where I try to say, look, I think everything in moderation, including moderation. This stuff can drag on for a while. You need to be careful. You need to be cautious. The dude especially, because, one person is doing all the heavy lifting and generally it's not him. Yeah. And if she's going through stimulation injections and he's out in the beer, creates tension, which you don't need. So you're saying, look, both of you need to live this, even though one of you is doing more work than the other, physically speaking. And you try to find, most people will just cut out alcohol because for some people that's just easier. Caffeine, same thing. A lot of people will just cut out caffeine. But some people go, look, can I just have a cup of tea? Yeah, you can. Go have a cup of tea. You don't. Are you going to, what is the statistical difference in live birth outcome between somebody who has 3 cups of tea during an IVF cycle versus somebody who doesn't? They're identical. Of course they're identical. What's the difference between somebody who drinks 2 liters of Coke every day versus somebody who doesn't? Well, you're probably going to see a differential there, but you're probably talking about people who aren't particularly healthy in the first place who are doing that. So what can I do in terms of diet and lifestyle to optimize my chances of success is a question that's generally only asked by people who are already doing it. So they've made all the strong yards already. The people who have high BMIs or are smoking or drinking heavily, who are compromised to an extent because of that kind of stuff, I mean, they don't need to be worried about that small little piece. They've got a whole bunch of factors they need to address in the first place. Geez, can I have a cup of coffee? Mate, you're smoking 20 cigarettes a day. Stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the people who are asking, can I have a cup of coffee, are drinking so little coffee already. Can I have a glass of wine? Are drinking so little. They're freaking out about going to their sister's wedding on a Friday, 2 weeks before they start stimulation injections, wondering if they can drink. Of course they can. You've got to try to be balanced, right? But when you deliver that message in the round or on a podcast or in the media, it gets weaponized
and it
against
gets taken
you.
out of context, which Absolutely. Is why it's not deserving of a soundbite. People need to listen to the entire thing.
Absolutely. and what's happened is the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists in Ireland have now just said, there is no amount of alcohol that has been proven to be safe in pregnancy. And it really is a good luck to you all. We tried being reasonable with you, and it hasn't worked out well at all. We need to keep our message super simple. Where it gets a bit more controversial is in something like exercise, where I know even within our own clinic, I would have a slightly different point of view than maybe some other people who would say, look, as you go through stimulation injections and cycle, you really need to drop exercise to a minimum, because I think that exercise is something that an awful lot of people lean on very heavily for their mental health, and taking that away from them while stressing them out with the cycle is really unfair.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. So what does that look like in practice? Well, you need to drop the intensity. And as your ovaries get bigger and swollen, that's going to happen naturally and organically. There's always very small risk if you're doing something really extreme that it's swollen, a bigger ovary can twist and you can get torsion. That can be dangerous. It's very, very, very rare. Okay. Serious, but very, very rare. So you mentioned that, and that's kind of scaremongering, so now but again, you need to be careful. And over the years, you've kind of sort of tried to learn to read this. Can I exercise during? I said, oh yeah, no, you can, I've been burnt a few times. I said, yeah, you can a bit. And they go, so listen, what are we talking about? CrossFit. Oh. Okay.
That's okay. A no.
Yeah. So like, you just look, I'm going to stop. I'll still do a bit of HIIT, and I've still got my spin class. Oh, for God's sake, we're not on the same page at all here. You're gone down that road.
You're an athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, you need to establish. When people ask that question, it needs to be individualized. You need to establish what their baseline is. What are you working with? And then giving sensible advice.
Are you working with an iron woman, or are you working with someone that wants to go for a brisk walk?
Absolutely. And it's like, well, I'll only go for a 10K jog. You're not going to go for a 10K jog. You're going to take it easy. You're going to go for a walk in the evening. I'm sorry, that's going to suck for you. But yeah. So it really is individual. It's not one size fits all. And if it has to be one size fits all, that size will suit nobody. Okay. So is there a safe level of exercise to take while going through this? There is no safe level of exercise. It's the same argument. Is it caffeine, alcohol, sugar? It's exactly the same. We can't tell you anything on that except be sensible. And I think people who are misbehaving know they're misbehaving. I don't think anybody's really that confused.
Misbehaving like a little child.
Yeah. But it's like we spoke earlier about fertility patients being compliant. I'd love to tell you I've never had a patient who smokes, but that wouldn't be true. I have, and some do. But let me tell you, the vast majority of them stop.
Yeah.
And they don't stop for anything else. They don't stop when they get a cough. They don't stop when they get a little heart scare. They don't stop when their uncle gets diagnosed with lung cancer. But they'll stop for fertility treatment, So these are compliant people, and they deserve to be supported in that compliance, as opposed to being vilified for very, very minor infractions that have no statistical bearing on the final outcome.
And we just spoke before, and I think that we'll wrap it up with this on the fertility thing. These people will give anything to have a baby. They will pay, they remortgage their house almost. They would do anything. And, it's sad. And some of them jump from clinic to clinic because they don't get the results they want from one. And they think they've been told that their sister in Prague did this. And, so it's so sad. So it's like, what bit of advice would you give them? If just to hear it.
I'm not pretending I have all the answers. I'm not. And I know that my ethos, philosophy, and ideology are not for everybody. When we first opened, we knew that there was going to be some pushback, and I'd been active in fertility for years, so there were going to be patients who were going to follow me, And I remember a story. You have a minute, do you?
Of course.
Yeah. I remember a story. There was a patient came in, and I did a consult with her. I hadn't seen it before, but she'd done a few cycles in a bunch of different clinics. That exact case that you were talking about. And I went through this plan, made the plan, said, right, worthwhile doing another cycle. Here's the numbers, the stats, all the rest. Gave her the plan. And she came back through our online system, through our portal system, weekly later saying, thanks very much for that. Really want to go ahead. Here's what I want to do differently. I want to have a scan here instead of here. I want blood tests here instead of here. I want this type of trigger at this dose instead of this type of trigger at this dose. You know, she was essentially doing, which is very reasonable for her, she was pooling all her aggregated knowledge from all the cycles she'd done in 4 or 5 different clinics, what she felt worked better for her cycles. I could see where she was coming from with it all. I want to do this, I want to do this. And I pushed back. I tried to be nice about it, but I pushed back, and I pushed back hard and said, yeah, we're not doing any of that. We're doing absolutely none of that. This is the protocol. If you're going to go through, this is what it looks like. We're not doing extra scans just because you want it. I'm not checking your progesterone levels here because you want it. I'm not doing this. I'm not using this trigger and this dose instead of this. This is what we're going to be doing. And I bookended it by saying, listen, fertility treatment is difficult. There needs to be trust. There needs to be honest communication. I need to be able to explain to you why I'm not doing this. You need to be able to ask these questions. But ultimately, I said, you know what? If this is the stuff you want, then this is not the clinic for you. You know, this is the reasons why, but, you know, and we knew when we started that was going to be one of the challenges we had, that there were patients who were going to ask for stuff, and it's a hell of a lot easier to just give it to them and say, who do I care? Just fine, do the extra scan. They'll pay for it. Everybody wins, right? But we didn't want to be that clinic. We want to say, we're doing it this way. We're doing it this way. And if you don't want to do it this way, then that's okay. A salute. Off you go. And I fully expected that she would come back or I'd never hear from her again, or she'd go, well, the hell with you. I know what I know. And it was incredibly gratifying that she came back and said, yeah, no, that's fine. Crack on then.
Okay.
And it was an eye-opener for me, because for years I had been scared of alienating the patient, scared of pushing back.
Sometimes they just want to be told what to do.
Exactly. And that's, you know, and like there's probably nicer ways of, you know, middle-aged white guys. Sometimes people just need to be told, you know, no. Like there needs to be explanation and communication around it. But for me, it brought home a really, really valuable lesson that has served me very well. We have our systems and we have our reasons for our systems. And I'm not saying they're perfect, but I'd say they're pretty good. And I think they're better than everybody else's. I'm going to say that anyway. If somebody comes in and says, hey, John, I've had this great idea for what I want to do with you for my next cycle. Okay. If I have 2 ways I can deal with that. The first is by explain why we're not going to do that, why we don't think that's a good idea, why it is something we've considered in the past, but we're not doing it for this reason. And they either take that advice and they continue to engage with us, or they leave. All right. That is exhausting. It is time consuming. It takes ages. You wind up having extensive conversations over and over and over. The same conversations about supplements, about add-ons. You wind up having the same. It is exhausting. And I would make more money if I just did the stuff they asked. Yeah. All right. So it is hard. We've had 3 years of it, and it is hard. It is the single biggest challenge that faces us. It is very, very difficult to keep holding the line. However, if you don't hold the line, if you break and you go, yeah, okay, look, you want to do this way, we'll just do it this way. You've made her happy for that cycle. You've made maybe some extra money for the clinic. And certainly your days got a little bit easier because you didn't have to have a detailed conversation. But here's what else you've done. You've maybe forced her into a little bit of extra financial something or other for something that's not going to help or not going to tangibly help. You've inflicted an extra medication or test or something, which has its own side effects and complications, albeit small in her. But that's not the worst thing you've done. The worst thing you've done is you have damaged your and the clinic's relationship with her. You have told that woman that she has to come up with the good ideas because you won't. You have told that woman, you've implicitly told that woman that she is in charge of her own success, that you aren't on it. That if she doesn't come up with something, suggestions and alternatives, then you won't. You have told her that if she isn't researching and telling you what to do, her success rate is going to be compromised. She hasn't intended for that to happen. You haven't intended for that to happen, but that is what has happened in that relationship. And it represents a fundamental And this is a big deal. It represents just a fundamental cracking and weakening of that relationship that the two of you had already. And I think, no more than with the supplements, we have historically been very, very careless of letting that happen and seeing where that goes. And where that goes is an ugly, unfair place. It's no more successful than not doing it in the first place, which is really important. And it's just, and ultimately, it's more damaging for the patient than it is for anybody else.
And it also makes her think she has to come up with the ideas.
Exactly.
Because, you know, when my sister was researching it, she's like, oh my God, Laura, my mind is boggled. There's so much conflicting information out there.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they want to they're putting themselves in your hands and you're going to do the best cycle that you can for them.
Yeah,
and that's
absolutely
really what should happen.
And of course we are. But there has to be trust. And if you don't let that happen, that's fine. And there's plenty of people who will say differently, go, no, it needs to be more bespoke. It needs to be this, it needs to be that. And I'm doing it this way. Fine. Listen, off you go. I'm not pretending to know everything, but I do know what works. I do know what metrics we use to achieve success. And I'm not willing to compromise on all of that. And without it having a massive tangible impact on success rates. And it's really hard, and it's a tough immediate conversation to say to somebody, I'm not going to prescribe that supplement. I'm not going to give you that add-on. That's not what we do here. And sometimes it's easy if it's a very clear thing, like, well, we don't do this product. We don't have it here, so you can't have it, so good luck, But when it's something simple like, can I have this supplement? Will you give me a prescription of this supplement? You feel like a bit of a jerk for saying no. You do.
It's like the DHEAs and all that.
I didn't want to say DHEA. I didn't want to say DHEA.
That's a conversation for another day. But I hear you.
But that's where I am with DHEA.
People are importing DHEA in from the UK because you can't get it in Ireland.
Exactly. And like, you're not checking your testosterone. What's happened with DHEA is utter madness. Like, people are driving their testosterone up through the roof. They're damaging their eggs. They're not using it properly. And it's been shown it doesn't improve live birth rates. It doesn't increase egg quality. I wish it did. But now, when somebody says, can I just start when was the last time I had to have a conversation about DHA with somebody? What day is it today?
Today is Tuesday.
So it was Monday then. It was yesterday.
Yeah.
And this is routine. And it is difficult and challenging, and you feel like a heel, and you're apologizing at the end of the conversation, saying, listen, I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you want to hear. I know you want to just be given it and be told. And it's a hell of a lot easier for me to do that, but it doesn't make it right. So we don't prescribe it here. Sorry.
Okay. Fair enough. John, I could talk to you forever, but I'm going to get to the last two questions that I ask every one of my guests, whether you're a fertility specialist or not. And that is, what advice would you give young people today?
I like, bet on yourself. I worked in the HSE essentially in the civil service for most of my adult life.
I love the way you say that.
It is, right? Yeah. And I didn't even think at the time, making the leap out of it was brave. Find something you're passionate about. Be willing to bet on yourself. When I left and when we started Therapy for Fertility, a friend of mine gave me, it just said something to me that I just found so reassuring. Because you're starting a new clinic and it might fail, right? He said, well, look, if it doesn't work out, it won't be for lack of effort.
Oh, yeah.
Life's nice, isn't it?
It really is. And do you know what as well? It's not like if you're scared of failure, goodness, it's much worse to kind of go, Jesus, I wish I'd done that, isn't it? And no one cares if you failed.
And if you're passionate about, look, I'm very passionate about what I do. Really, I am. And if it doesn't work, it's not because I didn't try. And if you tried, sod it, that's fine. So young people, what I want from my kids, I want them to find something they're passionate about. I'm so lucky that I love my job because so few people do. So few people love their job. I love my job. I've got the best job in the world. So if you can get anywhere close to that, yeah, you'll work a day in your life. That's a stupid expression,
Yeah.
but it'll make the days a lot better,
Absolutely. So, and what's the meaning of life, John?
Oh, I don't know. Jesus, I don't know. You were going to ask me that. And I was thinking about it. I don't know. I find, again, goes back to that thing, find something you're passionate about. I also think that happiness is overrated. I think contentment is underrated. For me, anyway. I think happiness is spiked. I think stability. I'm a little creature of habit, but stability and being very content in what you have and who you are, not caring what other people think about you. I think that's, except people in your circle, in your tribe. Obviously, their opinion is invaluable, but outside of that, you can't let you drive yourself nuts. But contentment, that being very happy within yourself. We all struggle in our own skins, obviously we do, but trying to find that contentment to be, rather than be worried about, will this make me happy? No, take it a step back. What will make you content, you know?
I love that. John, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All of this wisdom.
Oh, yeah, that's a worry.
Thank you.